It's just before midnight, on August 14th, 1945, and a handful of junior officers are tearing through the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, opening doors, searching closets, interrogating terrified chamberlains. They have bayonets fixed, they're sweating through their uniforms, and they're hunting for a phonograph record. Not just any record. The record. The one that will end the war. The one that contains the voice of a living God. A voice most of these soldiers have never heard. A voice that, in less than 12 hours, will tell 70 million Japanese people that everything they believed, everything they fought for, everything 3 million of their countrymen died for, was over. The officers need to find it. They need to destroy it. Because if that recording reaches the radio stations, if the Emperor's voice goes out over the airwaves and tells Japan to surrender, then the war is truly finished. And these men, exhausted, fanatical, desperate, cannot let that happen. What makes this whole thing even more surreal? When that broadcast finally does air the next day at noon, when 70 million people crowd around radios in factories and town squares and bombed out homes to hear their emperor speak, for the first time in history, most of them won't understand what the hell he's saying. I'm not talking about denial. I'm talking about literal comprehension. The Emperor of Japan announced the end of the most brutal war in human history in a language his own people couldn't understand, on equipment so primitive that his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, using words so archaic that even educated Japanese needed translators. This is the story of the strangest surrender in World War II, the coup attempt that almost stopped it, and the broadcast that changed everything, even though nobody knew what it said. By mid-August 1945, Japan is dying. That's not dramatic language. It's strategic assessment. 2 atomic bombs have vaporized Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Soviet Union has just declared war and is steamrolling through Manchuria. American B-29s are incinerating cities almost every night. The home islands are under blockade. Starvation is creeping in. But surrender, that word doesn't exist in the Japanese military vocabulary, at least not for themselves. The official policy is Ketsugo, decisive operation. Every man, woman, and child will fight to the death on the beaches. Suicide attacks. Sharpened bamboo spears. 100 million martyrs for the Emperor. Except now the Emperor himself is about to do the unthinkable, here on obscured World War II chronicles. These are the stories we live for, the moments where history pivots on a phonograph record and a handful of desperate men. If that's your kind of history, hit subscribe. Trust me, this gets stranger. So here's the situation. On August 14th, after days of agonizing debate, Emperor Hirohito makes his decision. Japan will accept the Potsdam Declaration. They will surrender. But, and this is crucial, the Emperor himself will announce it. Not the Prime Minister, not the military, the Tenno, the living descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu, the man whose voice has never been broadcast, whose face most Japanese have never seen in photographs, who exists somewhere between human being and deity. He will speak directly to his people for the first time in 2,600 years of imperial history. The decision is made around noon on August 14th. The recording session is scheduled for 11:30 p.m. that night, which gives the hardliners about 11 hours to stop it. The recording setup is, I'll be honest, almost comically inadequate for the most important announcement in Japanese history. They're using standard NHK broadcast equipment. Nothing special. The studio is a room in the Imperial Household Ministry building. The microphone is a single ribbon mic on a stand, and they're cutting the audio directly onto 2 sets of phonograph masters, those big lacquer discs that were standard in 1945. No rehearsals, no sound check. The Emperor will read his rescript, his imperial declaration, once, maybe twice if needed, and that's it. At 11:30 p.m. on August 14th, Emperor Hirohito enters the room. He's wearing his military uniform. He's 44 years old, slight, bespectacled, and by all accounts, exhausted. The room is sweltering. It's mid-August and there's no air conditioning. Everyone is sweating. The technicians bow so low their foreheads nearly touch the floor. Nobody makes eye contact. The emperor is handed the rescript, handwritten in classical court Japanese by the cabinet. It's 4 minutes long. He begins reading. His voice is high-pitched, thin, slightly nasal. He's reading in a style called gyokuon, dual voice, which is the formal court Japanese used exclusively by emperors. Not modern Japanese. Not even the Japanese spoken by educated officials. This is language from the Manyoshu from the Heian period, from 1,000 years ago. Verb forms nobody uses, pronouns that exist only in ancient texts. Formal constructions so elaborate, they turn simple statements into Baroque puzzles. He doesn't say, "We are surrendering." He says, "We have ordered our government to communicate to the governments of the United States, Great Britain, China, and the Soviet Union that our empire accepts the provisions of their joint declaration." He doesn't say, "We lost." He says, "The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage, while the general trends of the world have all turned against her interest, not necessarily to Japan's advantage." That's like the Titanic sending a telegram saying voyage proceeding with unexpected complications. But here's the thing, this isn't evasion, this is how emperors speak. This is the language of edicts and rescripts. Hirohito is performing a ritual that's older than feudalism, and he's doing it into a microphone that keeps cutting out. The first take has audio problems. They do it again. Second take, better but not great. The recording quality is terrible. It sounds muffled, distant, like someone speaking through a blanket. But it's midnight now, and there's no time for a third attempt. The technicians carefully remove the master discs. 2 complete sets, in case one gets damaged. They're each about 12 inches across, fragile, one of a kind. The emperor's voice, trapped in lacquer grooves, Kamberlen Hisatsun Sakomizu, takes personal custody of the recordings. He has to keep them safe until noon tomorrow, just 12 hours, when they'll be transported to the NHK, Japan Broadcasting Corporation, building and broadcast nationwide, 12 hours. Should be simple, right? He decides to hide them in the safest place he can think of. The office of the Empress's Lady-in-Waiting, on the 2nd floor of the Imperial Household Ministry building. He puts them in a small bag, stashes the bag in a locked cabinet, and goes home. By 1 a.m. on August 15th, the coup is underway. The ringleader is Major Kenji Hatanaka. He's 28 years old, a staff officer in the Ministry of War, and he is absolutely losing his mind at the idea of surrender. For weeks he's been trying to organize resistance among the officer corps. Most have refused. They understand it's over. But Hatanaka finds allies among the younger officers, true believers, men who think one more battle, one more sacrifice, will somehow turn the tide. Their plan is bonkers, but it almost works. Step 1. Win over the Imperial Guards Division, the 1st Division, which protects the Imperial Palace. Without them, you can't control access to the Emperor or the palace grounds. Step 2. Find and destroy the recording. No recording, no broadcast. No broadcast, the war continues. Step 3. Issue fake orders in the Emperor's name, ordering the military to keep fighting. Step 4. Somehow convince the entire nation that surrender was a mistake orchestrated by traitorous advisors, and that the Emperor actually wants to fight to the end. It's insane. It's desperate. And for about 4 hours in the middle of the night, it's actually happening. Hatanaka and his co-conspirator, Captain Shigetaro Uehara, go to see Lieutenant General Takeshi Mori, commander of the 1st Guards Division. It's around 1 a.m. They need Mori on their side. Without his authorization, the guards won't move. They beg, they plead. They cite Bushido, the samurai code, the honor of Japan, the will of the divine emperor. Mori refuses. He's read the rescript. He knows the emperor's will. The answer is no. Hatanaka's hand goes to his pistol. Mori sees it. For a moment, one horrible, suspended moment, nobody moves. Then Hatanaka draws. The gunshot is shockingly loud in the small office. Mori drops. Another officer slashes him with a sword to make sure. Blood pools on the maps, spread across the desk. Maps of the home islands, marked with defensive positions that will never be used. They've just murdered a general. They're past the point of no return. Hatanaka and his men forge General Mori's seal on orders to the Guards Division, seal the palace, cut all communication lines, no one in or out. They claim there's been a plot against the emperor, and they're protecting him. The soldiers, believing the orders are legitimate, comply. Within an hour, the imperial palace is locked down. Phone lines are cut. Gates are sealed. The most heavily defended square mile in Japan is now controlled by a handful of rebel officers who've committed murder and treason, and now they start searching for the recording. They ransack offices. They interrogate palace staff. Where are the recordings? Where's the emperor's voice? Chamberlains are shaken awake, questioned at gunpoint. Nobody knows. The palace is a maze, hundreds of rooms, multiple buildings, a complex that's been expanded over centuries. And somewhere in there is a small bag containing 2 phonograph records. They never find it. Hours pass. Hatanaka is increasingly frantic. It's 3 a.m., then 4 a.m. Dawn is coming, and the commanding general of the Eastern District Army, General Shizuichi Tanaka, has gotten word that something very wrong is happening at the palace. Tanaka drives there personally. He's 58, a career officer utterly loyal to the emperor. When he approaches around 5 a.m., the guards stop him. They have orders to let no one through. Tanaka gets out of his car. He's not a tall man, but he stands there in the pre-dawn darkness, still wearing his uniform from the emergency meeting he just left, and he starts talking. Not shouting, talking. He asks the guards who gave them their orders. They show him the paperwork. He tells them General Mori is dead, murdered. The orders are fake. This is mutiny. The emperor's will is surrender. And they are disobeying the emperor by following these traitors. One by one, the soldiers lower their weapons. By 6 a.m., it's over. The palace is secured. Hatanaka and his co-conspirators flee. They know what's coming. There's no escape, no forgiveness. At 8 a.m., on the plaza in front of the imperial palace, Major Kenji Hatanaka puts his pistol to his head and fires. He's 28 years old. He'll be buried in an unmarked grave. Years later, some Japanese nationalists will call him a hero. Most will call him a fanatic. I'll be honest. I think he was a true believer who couldn't accept that belief isn't enough. That faith can't stop B-29s. That courage doesn't win wars when you're fighting the industrial capacity of the United States. But that's just my read. At 7:21 a.m. on August 15th, NHK Radio announces that there will be an important broadcast at noon. Citizens should prepare to hear the emperor's voice. Across Japan, people stop. The emperor's voice. It's unthinkable. It's unprecedented. It's terrifying. Factories halt production. Offices close. Families gather around radio sets, the ones who still have them. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, survivors who can move drag themselves to working radios. Military units assemble in formation to listen. In some places, officers order soldiers to stand at attention. Nobody knows what the emperor will say. Rumors are flying. Some think he'll announce a new offensive. Some whisper about surrender, but don't dare say it aloud. Some think it's a trick American propaganda. At noon exactly, the broadcast begins. First comes the national anthem, Kimigayo. Then static, crackling, and finally, the voice. It's thin, high-pitched, nearly inaudible under the hiss and crackle of the terrible recording quality. And the words, oh, the words. To our good and loyal subjects, classical verb forms, archaic pronouns, having been able to safeguard and maintain the structure of the imperial state. What does that mean? The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Wait, what? People are leaning into radios, straining to hear, trying to pass sentences that sound like they're coming from the Heian period. The recording skips in places. The emperor's voice wavers. and he never, not once, utters the word surrender. The closest he comes is this: we have resolved to endure the unendurable and suffer the insufferable. Some people understand. Educated listeners, people familiar with court language, military officers who've been briefed. They know. The emperor is telling them the war is over. Japan has lost. But millions, literally millions, have no idea what they just heard. In rural areas, in villages among the working class, people turn to each other after the broadcast ends and ask, "Did we win or lose?" Some think the emperor just announced a new strategy. Some think he said Japan would fight harder. Newspapers have to publish translations from Japanese to Japanese, from classical court language to modern vernacular, so people can understand what their own emperor said. Actually, let me back up for a second and put this in perspective. Imagine if President Truman had announced the end of WW2 in Shakespearean English. Not modern English, with a few fancy words, actual Elizabethan English. Hark, good subjects, the martial disposition hath turned not to our favor. That's the gap we're talking about. The reaction, once people understand, is seismic. Some soldiers commit suicide immediately, right there in formation. Some officers refuse to believe it and barricade themselves with their units. Some civilians weep openly. Some feel nothing but relief that the bombing will finally stop. In the imperial palace, Emperor Hirohito removes his military uniform and sits in silence. He's just done something no emperor has done in recorded history: admitted defeat, taken personal responsibility, spoken directly to commoners. The weight of it, the mythology of 600 years of divine imperial lineage, has just hit the floor and shattered. 18 days later, on September 2nd, 1945, Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu signs the instrument of surrender on the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. General Douglas MacArthur accepts on behalf of the Allied powers. The ceremony is in English. It's in plain language. Everyone understands what's happening, but for Japan, the war really ended on August 15th at noon. With a voice nobody recognized, in a language nobody spoke, saying words nobody understood, and yet everyone knew. Here's the thing that stays with me about this story. The emperor's recording. Those fragile lacquer discs that Hatanaka and his men spent 4 desperate hours trying to find, they still exist. They're in the National Archives. You can listen to them. The audio is exactly as bad as everyone said. Scratchy, muffled, barely audible. The voice of a god. Sounds like a man with a head cold, speaking through a telephone from 1920. But I think about the young soldiers who heard that broadcast. 19-year-old conscripts who'd been training with bamboo spears to fight Americans on the beaches, who'd been told they were defending the land of the gods, who believed, really believed, that surrender was worse than death. And then this incomprehensible voice comes through the static and tells them, what? To endure the unendurable. Some of them must have felt relief. Some must have felt betrayal. Some probably felt both at once. Major Hatanaka died believing he was saving Japan. The emperor lived believing he was saving Japan. They both might have been right. We'll never know how many more would have died in an invasion. American estimates ranged from hundreds of thousands to millions. Japanese casualties would have been apocalyptic. So maybe the strangest surrender in history was also the most merciful. A voice from another century, speaking in a dead language, announcing the end of everything. And somehow, despite the static and the archaic grammar and the confusion, somehow the message got through. The war was over. There's one more detail I want to leave you with. In the years after the war, Emperor Hirohito gave exactly one interview to an American reporter about the surrender broadcast. The reporter asked him if he knew most Japanese couldn't understand what he'd said. Hirohito paused. Then he said, "And this is verified. I knew, but some truths are too painful to say plainly. If this story meant something to you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear about the coup that failed, the recording that survived, and the surrender that nobody understood. And if your family has a WW2 story, Japanese, American, any side, we want to hear it in the comments. This is Obscure World War U Chronicles. Until next time.